Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole McNeil, and I am delighted to welcome you to our inaugural Ways of Knowing event hosted by the IEI's Center for Educational Research and Action. We're so glad that you're here. Before we begin, a quick reminder, please scan the QR code to register your attendance. We're going to have a drawing for one of Susan's books at the end. Okay, so let's get started. As Aristotle famously wrote, and as Aquinas later affirmed, all people, by nature, desire to know. In other words, humans are made to learn, and our powerful learning mechanisms begin operating even before birth. They fuel our ability to learn language, to connect with others, to read, to do math, to solve complex problems. And yet, despite our remarkable capacity for learning, far too many people in our society do not achieve basic literacy and numeracy. So how do we make sense of that? That's the question we're going to explore together today with a priest, a scientist, and a humanist. And to begin, it is my pleasure to introduce Brodie Ralston, an amazing senior here at Notre Dame studying neuroscience, who has spent the past 3 years working in our Cognition Learning and Development Lab and serving as a high-impact tutor at Darden Elementary School through TutorND. Brodie will provide us with some background to set the stage for our discussion today. So take it away, Brodie.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Hi, everyone. All right, let me get myself all situated here. I'm very fun, by the way. So, hi, everyone, again. My name is Brodie, and I'm speaking to you guys all today. Let's see. A couple more slides. There we go. I'm speaking to you guys all today as a representative of the Cognition Fellows. The Cognition Fellows are undergraduate students carefully selected from among exemplary tutors in the South Bend community and supported through TutorND's AmeriCorps grant. At Cognition Fellows, we mentor new tutors, help them create and refine training materials, and above all, study the cognitive science that helps to iteratively improve our tutoring process. Given that description, it might not come as a surprise to a lot of you that a lot of our fellows go on to do helping careers, such as teaching, school psychology, and pediatrics. I, for example, hope to carry the lessons I've learned from the Cognition Fellows onto a career in medicine. So to kind of set the stage a little bit, I want to ask you a question, and Dr. McNeil kind of gave us a bit of a prelude. Where does learning begin? Some of you might respond to that question and say it's on the first day of preschool. Others might say it happens when kids start to walk or to talk. But others still might say it happens even sooner, like when birth happens. But the answer, and we kind of got a prelude to this too, was that it happens even before that. Learning begins to happen while we're still in the womb. How do we know that? In carefully designed experiments, researchers measure newborns' learning by using responses like changing and sucking patterns or how long they listen to a sound. Using these methods, scientists have found that newborn babies recognize and prefer their mother's voices over anyone else's because they've heard it in the womb. In another famous study, when pregnant women repeatedly read aloud a passage from The Cat in the Hat, their babies recognize that passage right after birth. These findings point to something truly remarkable, that humans are prepared to learn from even the earliest stages of life. And yet, despite this frankly amazing capacity, literacy and numeracy outcomes across the country are very concerning. National data shows that too many students are not yet reading at a basic level. Among high school seniors, reading scores are at their lowest point since the early 1990s. Math performance, similarly, has also remained persistently low. At many large universities, large numbers of incoming students now require remedial math. So that kind of brings us to this big, important question here. If humans are made to learn, then why do so many people in our society struggle to achieve basic literacy and numeracy? As someone who studies cognitive science and works a lot at schools, particularly at Darden, I look really forward to hearing the answer that our panelists have to this. All right, So that's everything that I have to say. Now it's my pleasure to invite Sydney Brown to the podium, who is one of our post-bac era fellows.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Brody, that was a great introduction. Thank you. So I was an ACE teacher in Baton Rouge. I served an entirely Black and Latino community that was severely under-resourced. My time teaching there left me wanting to do a lot more for our educators, for our families, and of course for our children. And that desire actually brought me back here to the IEI, where I now serve as a post-bac fellow to help bridge educational research and action. So it's my honor, let's make sure you guys can see here, to introduce our three wonderful panelists who bring different ways of knowing to our big question for today. As I've learned, especially as a teacher, there are a lot of ways to approach a question. And the more perspectives that we can bring into our discussions, the better our solutions will be, and the more that we're gonna be able to grow as a community. Our first panelist here on the right is Father Lou DelFra. Father Lou is a Holy Cross priest here at Notre Dame and director of pastoral life for both ACE and IEI. There have been many a time, trust me, that his homily gave me the faith to believe in myself and God needed to get through the tough times that you have as a teacher. As a former teacher and a spiritual leader to many educators, he brings a theological lens to our conversations today. Next, we have Professor Ji Sun in the middle here, who's a cognitive scientist visiting us from Cal State LA. Her work focuses on how to, in her very own words, teach hard things to all of our students. She brings a scientist perspective to our discussion today. And finally, I also have the great honor of introducing Professor Susan Blum here. She's an anthropologist here at Notre Dame who studies culture and schooling and the structures that shape our education. I actually took Professor's class, which was great, on childhood and culture across the world. And it was really a personal favorite of mine. I still think about it all the time and when I was teaching. She brings our humanist perspective today, and it's going to challenge us to think critically about our systems of education. So with that framing, I'm going to invite our panelists to respond to our question from their specific way of knowing. Again, as a reminder, here's our question. If humans are made to learn, then why do so many people in our society struggle to achieve basic literacy and numeracy? With that, we're going to go ahead and start with Father Lou.
Great, thanks, Sydney.
Yeah.
So a pastoral perspective often begins from what's called a revealed truth, something that God reveals about God's self or about the human person that we couldn't come to on our own. For example, God so loved the world that he sent his only son so that we can all have life. I love science. We can't get there from a science lab, right? That's got to be revealed to us by God, either through scripture or through the church's centuries-old tradition. Now, one of the most foundational revelations made about the human person comes from our creation story in Genesis. And the revealed truth that God wanted to tell us about ourselves, and this is going to get to the question, is so important that the authors of Genesis actually make a theological error in telling the story just so they can make this point. The point comes at the creation of the first human being, right? And you know the story. God creates one single solitary human being. And God, after 5 days of creating everything else and saying, good, 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 gets to the one single solitary human being. What's the first words out of God's mouth? It is not good for that one to be alone. They have God making a mistake, right? In order to drive home this point, that, they put the human being back to sleep, create the second, and then and only then do we get the revealed truth that every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. Only when the human person can live with other people and for other people do we get that truth. Human beings fully flourish only in relationship with other human beings. So when we map that truth that Genesis gives us onto educational theory, which is your area of expertise, not mine, I bet we come up with some interesting conclusions. The importance of the teacher-student relationship, the importance of the student-to-student relationship, the importance of the classroom as community, the impact of healthy and unhealthy family systems on a student's capacity to learn. A whole interesting conversation about the good use and the dangers of AI, which can seem to promise education without human interaction. What does that mean? And so then to get to the question that was asked, the very next thing Genesis tells us through the little narrative of the serpent and the apple is that we screwed the whole thing up. All our relationships are broken. All our relationships are fractured. Our relationships and all human communities are inherently flawed from a pastoral perspective because they're composed of flawed human beings. Me and you and everyone. Yes, but they're humans. So one pastoral answer to the question, why do so many people in our society struggle to achieve literacy and numeracy, I think, can be found in the imperfections that we find in all relationships and communities. This can be at the personal level, teacher to student to student. Think of the effects of bullying on a student's capacity to learn. Or they can be at the structural level, because flawed humans create flawed structures. So the relationship of the government to different school districts may be flawed. Not saying they are, just they might be. And so I'll end with this. Another great resource that a pastoral approach to the question, that a pastoral approach can give us to the question, it comes from the Catholic social teaching, which is that part of Catholic doctrine that focuses on the human community as a whole. And it begins with that bedrock principle that every single human being is made in the image and likeness of God. But it goes further and then says that we as a human community have the responsibility of ensuring that every person reaches that identity, with special attention given to the marginalized. And so as we unpack why many people don't achieve numeracy and literacy, I think Catholic social teaching can provide a really powerful tool to break open some of the structural problems that we see.
Can we clap? Oh, I'm really glad you started us off. And I come from an evangelical church tradition, so I feel like right now we should have the choir come up.
And so I really love that we started there from these humans. And it was really only when there were two that we said, that God said, okay, now it's good.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So when I thought about this question, I was really inspired by Brody and all the things he told us, but there's so many other things like that. Like human children, they're able to learn perfect grammar in their native language with seemingly no deliberate instruction. They just walk around, they just learn it, right? For anyone who has tried to learn a second language, you appreciate how hard that is, right? You have never seen my face before, but if I make a face, you instantly know it. You instantly are able to intuit how I feel. That's amazing. That's an amazing capacity. We all seemingly get that just by hanging out with humans, right? No special accoutrement necessary, right? So we are incredibly gifted learners. However, let's think about literacy and numeracy. These are not things that are natural, right? They are not things that come easily by just toddling around in the world. To learn a writing system had to be invented. That's only about 5,000 years old, right? In the scope of humanity, that's new, right? And I study things like how people learn algebraic functions. Talk about unnatural. Like this is like not a thing that people are like, yes, I just feel it, I'm vibing, right? And so the things that we're trying to get people to do at scale are very different humanly invented things, right? Like place value is a human invention, right? Like zero, we didn't have zero for a long time, and then zero like really changed the game, right? Like I just wanted to take a moment to be like, yes, for zero, you know? My favorite number now. And it's one of those things where we don't realize as a society, as more than one person, we have done so much, and now we're trying to like shortcut that incredible, like hard-won discovery to our kids. Like now we don't think about it as any big deal that a kindergartner learns about zero. But it's like, wow, they're like skipping ahead like generations, centuries, right? So even though it's really unnatural, we have achieved this at scale with this cool little idea we had called school. Right? Like school, compulsory elementary school, was like early 1900s-ish. Don't fact check me on this one, but you know what I mean? It's like not that old in the United States. It took us a long time to get to like compulsory elementary school, and that was an amazing lever to get a lot of people literate at some basic level, right? But let's think about what it took. Like, I reread the Laura Ingalls Wilder books last year, Little House on the Prairie, and homegirl was like 16, had never left home, knew just like books, and then they like just put her in charge of like 12 kids. They like pooled their money together and like said, you guys, just go to this lady, and she's gonna teach you everything. And we thought that was like totally normal. Like we're like, that's cool. In fact, it's such a great system. We should scale this up to 50 million kids, right? And we did. The fact, I tell my children who complain about their LAUSD school every day, and I'm like, it is free for you to go to school and learn stuff like algebra. That is amazing. Not every kid, they hate this because I'm like, not every kid has that opportunity all over the globe, right? And it's true. Billions of people do not have access to that, even now, right? You have to be wealthy, you have to pay school fees, right? So it's an incredible thing we've done. But I want to think about what schooling is. It is deliberate teaching of certain things. It is practice doing those things for some purpose. And it is something that we as a society agree on that we need to teach everybody, right? We have some agreement. Now, let's skip to now. Do we still agree on the same things that everybody should know? Do we still believe in this enterprise of schooling? Is our democracy predicated on the idea that people have enough knowledge and skills and understanding and literacy to vote, right? I think those things are in flux right now. And there's a lot that has changed in the world. The world has actually become a more complex place. You now have to understand the concept of insurance. That's a very weird thing that we now kind of expect people to understand. But does anyone understand insurance? Like, turn to your neighbor. No, I'm kidding. But like, if we did a think, pair, share on like, what is insurance? How does it actually work? This is a hard thing. But this is the kind of concept that people need to know in order to vote on things that have to do with insurance regulation, right? And so how are we gonna do this? Are we failing to do something? If so, what is it exactly that we're failing to do? What is it that we do agree on that we're failing to do, right? So I'm terrible. I'm such an academic. I end a question with the questions.
Okay, well, these are some pretty tough acts to follow. I mean, a homily, a humorous, impassioned plea for democracy, and all I am is a lonely humanist here. So I've been thinking about this question a lot, and you gave a lot of my examples, but it's okay. I have so much more to say because I'm an academic. I wrote, my latest book is 400 pages. So my answer to the question is sort of, well, and I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks doing research on these questions. What is literacy? Is it one thing? Is it many things? Who defines it? For what purpose? What is numeracy? How is it? How does it live in the world even before you get to the question of insurance? How do you figure things out? And as an anthropologist, we know that there are lots of versions of literacy and lots of versions of numeracy. I'm going to cite one anthropologist, Shirley Bryce Heath, who wrote about different forms of literacy, even within the United States, where people came to their interaction with writing. And yes, I'm teaching a class on media, and we talk about the fact that writing is invented and it's recent in the human experience, but even at the same moment in time, different communities will have different kinds of interaction with text. Some will see it as the primary way of interacting. Others will see orality as more important and writing as supporting that. Others will see writing as something to be grappled with in a kind of dialogical way. And all of those people end up in school. And one of the things we know is that school tends to have a kind of uniform structure. So one of my answers to the question of why it's so hard for people to learn literacy is because we teach them in school. And we might have to do that, but maybe school doesn't have to be uniform. And we have lots of questions about equity and uniformity, but one of the things we also know about the structures of school is that they are, in many ways, profoundly alienating for both the best students, and many of you are those people, and because you've achieved many academic things, so the system worked for you just like it worked for me, but it's alienating even for the best students who often find themselves motivated by the approval of someone else, and it's often alienating for students from less advantaged backgrounds who come into classrooms that are maybe not set up for people like them, and then what motivates them is fear. And fear is not the best motivator. It does work. You know, as a cognitive scientist, a learning scientist, you know that behaviorism, the idea of manipulating people from outside, is something that is in some ways baked into our school systems, but it also backfires. So one of the things that we know is that if we persist in trying to shove unwanted material into these beautiful brains of our young people, they will resist and it won't work. So I've been writing a little bit about reading and writing, and even I have a thing about math wars in my latest book. But you know, think about, there's an argument in linguistics about whether number is universal or whether number is something that happens in most languages but maybe not all languages. And there's an example of a language called Piraha, which doesn't apparently have number, but maybe it does. There's confusion about what the data are showing and how it was collected, which is a methodological problem that we should also always think about. But even basic number can be taught as a worksheet, as a set of algorithmic transformations, which you have to do because the teacher is making you do it, and you're going to fail if you don't get the answer right on number 13. Or you can invite young, beautiful, malleable minds into the experience of numeracy, using things like the Montessori system does, like manipulatives, where people live with it. They have a goal, they have a motive for trying to understand how to divide things, how to categorize things. And then once they have a confident, secure base, rather than what so many of our students get, which is panic, then more and more things can be added to it. There's a lot of work done by people like Frank Smith and Jean Lave, who have shown that out in the world, many children can demonstrate math competency. They can make change. They can buy things. They can calculate bowling scores. But even if you take that same exact skill and you put it on a test in school, they will fail that test. So there's something that we're doing in school that is also causing failure. And nobody wants that, of course, but that is one of the side effects, the unwanted side effects, as a researcher named Yong Zhao talks about, of some of the kind of coercive and alienating practices that we have in school. So that's my first round of answers to this.
Come on. Okay, before we go to questions and comments from the panelists and from audience members, we have asked one of our Burns Fellows, Hannah Peterson, to contribute to the discussion. Hannah previously completed a year-long Fulbright as an English teaching assistantship in Bulgaria. She has a background in theater and improv, and she's now a first-year graduate student in sociology working with Amy Langenkamp in CREO. And her task, I think this was a difficult task, sorry, but I'm giving you, get a little bit more time here. She had to listen very closely. She did not know what they were going to say, and her goal is to raise an unscripted question back to the panelists based on her integration of what they've said. So take it away, Hannah, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
Thank you so much. First of all, it was so lovely to be able to hear all of your different perspectives, and I think I can speak for everybody that we are so honored to have you all here and share your perspectives. So as a sociologist, I always go back to this idea of structure and the tensions that people have within structure. And so I think I heard for all of you, there's this idea of you're bringing in people into a structure, and that is inherently challenging and difficult. And especially in this world in which we are living in a space where not only certain things are contested, but how or who should be taught certain ideas and certain things, and who gets advantage and who doesn't. So I'd like to hear from all of you about how you think we can fix this, or ways that we could work together and move this forward, especially in a time when things are so politically contested and there are people who believe that schools should look a particular way versus another.
How are you going to fix it?
I pick up on Susan's point of, and it was really helpful to hear the deflating motivator that fear is, and how structures can create fearful environments. From a pastoral perspective, if you think about Jesus wanting to liberate the human spirit, if that was what he was looking to do, the most often repeated phrase by Jesus is, "Do not be afraid." So what did he see as the biggest threat to human liberation? Fear. And how do some of our structures create fearful motivators for students? That's really powerful.
Well, if your context is the U.S. and how to fix the U.S., that's a big question. And a bigger question than any of us can solve right now. But education is kind of a central ground of contestation, and has been for a very long time. Even when compulsory education began, some people wanted it, some people didn't want it. They didn't want the government telling them to make their children go to school. They wanted their kids to be home. They wanted them to work. Compulsory education, they had to have truant officers on the streets rounding children up, either because the kids wanted to work or they just didn't want to be in school. So school has never, in the US particularly, has never been uniformly embraced. We have new tensions right now about what is reality, what is knowing, what is science, what is evidence, what are the goals. I mean, we have so many things that are problematic, but there are also examples around the world of schooling systems that work a little bit better, and I know that there are reasons why it's better to teach elementary school in Finland than in perhaps some settings in the US. There's more homogeneity, there's more wealth, there's a social net, a safety net, and stuff like that. But they, for instance, they don't test their kids until they're well into their many years of schooling. They go outside, they play, they don't have homework. Even in high school, they don't have homework. There are a lot of good examples we can get from places like that. And one of the things they have begun to really do is to teach information literacy in a way that is probably necessary for all people now. So I think if we could dial down some of the tension in the US so that we aren't fighting every single battle in every single domain, there are examples of things that could make things better, less fear, less alienation. I mean, we also have an incredibly stratified education system, not only public, private, religious, charter, all that, but even within public schools, because of the way funding works in the US, it's so unequal, the amount of funding, especially vis-a-vis the need in different schools, is really quite contrasting. But I think people do love children, and they love their children, and I think that there is a public conversation now that's happening about the fact that our kids are struggling, and they have a lot of issues. And if we could come together maybe about the basics, not so much the extra stuff, but the really, truly foundational things, and some people are really trying to do that, then there's a chance that we could make it a little better.
Hope be changing,
Yeah.
Yeah, Hannah, good job coming up with the hard,
right.
good question. I am an immigrant that became a naturalized citizen when I was 13-ish. And I think the way that I've always imagined this is like, for my parents, when they immigrated, it's all like, okay, let me figure out the system. And let me figure out how to work it. Like, that's our vibe. That's how we come to it, right? So I think I've always thought, all right, let's see what we got. What do we have in our pantry? We got schools, we got teachers, we got unions, we got state standards. Okay, what do we got here? Can we make use of any of it? Can I chop some of that up and put it together, make a patty, fry it, Can we do any of that? And I actually think we got a lot of good stuff to work with here, guys. Some of it's not great. We gotta cut the mold out of the cheese, But we could work with this, right? One of the things that's hard, we gotta cut the mold out of the cheese, is Finland funds their schools so that richer areas get less money and poorer areas get more money. And we do it the opposite way, where we fund things through property taxes. And so richer areas have richer schools and poorer areas have poor schools. So that's the kind of stuff we really gotta dig out, right? But there's a lot of good stuff here, right? We've got structures where there's local schools. You could easily, if you want to be forced to read 1984, there is a high school willing to force you to read it, right? And lots of schools are every day doing this very expensive thing of gathering together children physically, putting teachers who have lots of schooling in charge of teaching them, and giving them resources to do this, right? So that's an incredible structure that we could make use of. There's a lot going wrong in that system. But the structures itself, it's actually incredible because I live in a zip code where only 10% or less of adults over the age of 25 have a college degree, right? Like many of those people could not teach their children the things that their teacher could teach their children, right? And so I feel incredibly privileged to live in a country where we're just like doing that on the daily, right? Now, we do also live in these incredibly segregated cities and neighborhoods and districts, right? And schools are a great example of de facto, sometimes helped by de jure segregation, right? And so I think one of the things I think about a lot is, hey, there are some really good structures in place, and there are structures that are working against the very things that we want. And one of the little pieces of hope I have is that it turns out when middle-class families happen to move into lower income areas and send their kids to those public schools just get better. They don't do anything different. They just get better. Now that's rare, and it often happens in the context of gentrification, but I actually think that's a very interesting thing. Just by having different groups of people living as neighbors and possibly loving their neighbors, right?
Speak it, sister. There you go.
I know. Can I get an amen? Right? Because it turns out humans can't help but not hate their neighbor. We're not great at loving them, I'll be honest. But it's very hard to hate your neighbor, you know? Because you just keep running into them. And I love that Jesus just hung out with his disciples all the time, right? Because that's part of loving. That's part of caring. That's part of learning about them, right? And one of the things I feel very scared of in this modern world is our increase, like I was telling somebody the other day how houses are now being built because we don't watch television together as a family. Everyone watches television alone, right? We should write that book, Not Bowling Alone, Watching Television Alone, right? And I feel very scared of that alonification that's happening, not just to children. Children are also watching television alone, watching YouTube alone, right? But for all of us, you know?
Just a point about that. There is, though, also this recognition that we miss each other. And so there are reading groups that get together and they read books together. And there are crafting groups where people get together and they knit. And there is, I think, this sense that fragmentation and individuation has gone about as far as it can go, and we want company. So there is some of that happening. And I think we can model that in our classrooms, but not if we're always pitting one student against another. So I think that creating a community that's supportive and cooperative, that can maybe work on projects together for an outcome that they all desire, that's the kind of thing we can do. People are doing it all over the place, whether you call it project-based or inquiry-based or student-led or whatever. And those are places where literacy and numeracy can be brought in for the purpose of something that matters. And then people have to figure out, what does that word mean? Because I need it in my poster. And somebody can help them figure that out. But it's not just for sort of literacy in and of itself as some abstract skill, but it's literacy for this or literacy for that. And one of the things that, I'm going to open this worm can. One of these things that the so-called science of reading has often done is it's completely removed reading from every context and every purpose, and it's made it this abstract thing. And nobody just reads. They read this, or they read that. They read the box, or they read the website, or they read something. And so the more real, the more embodied, the more social and culturally embedded the reading is, or the numeracy is, the more likely it is that students will also want the same goal as the teacher, rather than just not wanting to fail.
I mean, I use an analogy to talk about this sometimes where it's, imagine that we tell people, okay, you're gonna learn to cook, okay? And we're gonna start with the skill of knife skills. And so here's a block of styrofoam. We're gonna learn to julienne, we're gonna learn to chop and mince and dice, right?
Oh my God.
And we're not gonna give you real knives either. We're just gonna give you, you know, like little plastic, just saws. But imagine that's gonna be really useful one day. And we do this, and you know, you get all the way up, and you really learn to like shave and mince and do all these fancy knife work, right? And then we're like, all right, go make dinner. And they're like, I didn't really realize this was related to food, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we've kind of divorced these skills and bitsified them into little tiny chunks, where if you get 80% correct on it, check, you have passed the standard to a satisfactory degree. And then we, at the end, expect you to understand why we taught you all those skills, and you're supposed to just naturally put them all together, right? But it doesn't happen that way, right? And same thing for if you ever played like soccer, right? Like you do all those drills, and then you go play a game, and then the idea is that those drills are somehow related to the game, right? But I think for some kids, they're not related.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can open it up to audience. Audience questions or comments. We still have a good deal of time for discussion. And we have a microphone right here for anybody who would like to get in on this conversation.
Thank you. Susan, you mentioned you feel this longing broadly to, maybe the aloneness has peaked or bottomed out, and that people are, you know, that's obviously our hope. But I read something disturbing, a little headline in the New York Times today that said that, I forget what the percentage was, but I think it was approaching 50% of people may find their closest confidant to be an AI bot. So anyway, I'd love to hear maybe some hope from you that that isn't an irreversible trend, because I find it, you know, as a humanist myself, kind of problematic. So.
Yeah, I mean,
little bit problematic.
what's that?
A little bit problematic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Vivek Murthy pronounced loneliness as an epidemic, and people have traced loneliness to physical as well as mental poor health, and it leads to all kinds of terrible things. I don't know. I mean, I know that in Japan there has been a lot of loneliness among older people, and they have used robot dogs as sort of companions. And even though the people who are older and live alone know that these are robots, they nonetheless are finding comfort in that. So I don't know if AI, you know, AI is many things. It can be programmed. So we could, as a society, once we figure out about regulating these things, we could ask the AI companion to say, hey, let's go outside and meet a neighbor. You know, we could do that. I don't think they've done that yet.
Susan, can I ask a question?
Please, yes, because
So,
I don't know.
If we solve loneliness by having everyone have an AI best friend, have we solved loneliness?
Well, how do you measure loneliness? Do you measure loneliness by
Speak in my
asking?
language.
I am a humanist, but I'm a humanistic social scientist. So I know how to read some studies. And do you ask people to rate their loneliness? Do you observe them acting lonely? How do you assess loneliness? So one of the things that they've done before is they've asked, how many people do you have that you could call? Or how many people do you regularly interact with? And they've looked at cell phone interactions, and there are a bunch of methods you can use to assess interaction and networks and connections. If a person doesn't feel lonely, do we trust them? Do we believe them? I mean,
throw out that data.
I have trouble discounting their subjective well-being, report, but it clearly isn't desirable. But since our topic here is school and education, I wonder how much we can then dissuade, not forbid, students from disentangling themselves from their classmates. How can we make social interaction so desirable and positive that they want more of it, rather than bullying, rather than competition, rather than sabotage, all of this stuff that comes from this sense of scarcity and a zero-sum mindset, which we often have when the focus is on ranking and sorting and all of that. Is there a way we can reintroduce connection so that as at least our younger people move up into adulthood, they will still want and know how to do that? One of the things that has happened in the last 30, 40 years is parents in at least middle-class families have been controlling their children's movements. And so the children don't have the autonomy or the experience of going out and making neighborhood friends, for instance. There was the whole stranger danger and Richard Love's book, Last Child in the Woods. Not that it was always a paradise before. I mean, there was bullying in the past, but at least there was some sense that children should be in proximity with other people and maybe near peers. Maybe it's not only the narrow age mates of one age, but maybe it's a group of neighborhood kids. So the older kids teach the younger kids how to be a pal. And maybe we've lost all of that as there's no neighborhood softball, there are no neighborhood games, everything is sort of controlled by the adults. And so I think that has robbed children of the experience of learning how to manage their own social interactions. And, there's online dating, and which, no judgment. But there, a lot of our lives are lived now with devices, and I don't know if we've reached peak device yet.
And maybe you could give us the hope part.
I don't know. I'm pretty scared.
Fear.
I know. One thing I've been thinking about. So in the prophetic tradition, the prophets through the Hebrew scriptures, one of the things they were constantly railing against was the creation of idols. And what were they scared about? They were scared about taking something that was human-made and giving it transcendent value. And when letting something that was human-made tell us what our purpose and meaning in life is. We're really scared about that. When I think about AI, I think about that a little bit. What happens when it stops being a tool, be a great tool, and we start giving it transcendent value? We give it the power to tell us who we are. Think about what the algorithm is constantly doing to us, spitting back to you what you've clicked on before. Over time, it's telling you who you are, if we're not careful. And so I'm worried about it.
The hope falls on me.
Yes. Yeah.
No. I have kids, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, so I think about this a lot because they're going into this world, and I am trying to control them, and they're very difficult. I'm just trying to convince one of them that he needs to shower every day, and I'm like, okay, we gotta coerce this kid. You know?
Natural consequences. His friends don't want to be near him. Right?
But I have to suffer the consequences. You know?
I don't know.
And so one of the things I think about this interplay is how we are coerced by things that purport to not be coercing us, but happen to be coercing us. Like these devices, they all have an underlying economic model, right? Like Instagram is a huge moneymaker. And we're like, oh, but it's for free. Ha-ha, you're the product.
Right.
They're selling your attention. They're trying to keep you on Instagram because you provide the value, right? And it's like, we don't even know we're being coerced because it feels so good. It feels so good to be coerced, right? And to me, one of the things I think is a fact of life is that humans, in some ways, it takes a certain kind of discipline to be part of community. Because have you met some humans? They range, right? And some of them are hard to be in community. I mean, to me, the reason I need to follow someone like Jesus is because I need Jesus to love those humans, right? Because it's not like a natural, easy thing to do, to love people who are different from you, who you don't really understand and vibe with, right? Whereas AI, these algorithms, they are made to vibe with you. Your For You page is for you. That's a very hard thing for us to be set free from, right? And it doesn't feel coercive at all, right? And so I see this tension between the things that are good, the things that are lovely, the things that are true. God, they require discipline. And the things that are so tempting and easy, they require no discipline at all, you know?
And that's where structures come into play. And I mean, you can call them structures, you can call them regulation, the algorithm. Somebody made a decision about the sycophantic nature of the AI algorithm that keeps praising us. Good question. Yes.
I would love to help you with that.
Right, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could also say, can you push harder? That wasn't give me a better question.
But will people stay for such an AI?
Right.
It's part of what people like.
Right, as opposed to teachers.
Right. We are annoying to our students by being like, you couldn't have manner.
May I add a quick question to that? I think there's actually this great feature that you can go into your AI and tell it how to respond to you. So like I've actually instructed it, like I'm not always right, neither are you. Like I want you to think about blind spots or areas that I might be missing and feed those to me in response to the questions that you give me. So that takes like 10 seconds to do, but that automatically changes like just the data that I'm reviewing and things that, like its job now is to not be my friend.
But over time, it still drifts.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, because the goal of those algorithms is to keep you on, right? So it's like, you know, Facebook released shorts because of TikTok. Right? But one of the things they find is that you'll stay on longer with shorts. Shorts get way more views than traditional YouTube. But part of it is because they value less who you subscribe to, who you say you want to watch, what you say you're interested in. They just use your behavior.
We have another comment over here.
So we're at college. And when I think about a lot of the problems that we've talked about and I've thought about with my own kids, I can trace a lot of it back to money. And it's not just the districts that we live in, but also the software that the schools are buying and the APs that our kids are taking and the SATs. Can you maybe talk about what college as like the top can start doing to maybe trickle down to address some of that? Maybe, because that's where we are. Like, I think if I start thinking too much about elementary school, my kids are not there anymore, like, I can't help that. But, like, is there something that we here at a Notre Dame with a Catholic mission, are there things that we can do to maybe help the system from where we are?
I mean, I think all of us try every day to do that, to teach our students how to be thoughtful, critical consumers of information and contributors to knowledge, and not just out for their own individual achievement and success. But the structures are also make that challenging because there are a lot of reasons why students may be maximizing their own success. And for me, I think there are very different kinds of colleges too. Notre Dame and elite schools like this have certain kinds of goals and certain kinds of expectations and certain kinds of students. High achieving, accomplished, ambitious. I have given talks at community colleges where their student body is quite different, with a bunch of different goals, a bunch of different relationships to the material and to the school as a whole. I was at a school last year, and one of their biggest challenges was trying to figure out how to keep students coming to school when they had responsibility to care for elders and children and spouses, and they also were working full-time, and transportation was difficult. And so those students had a completely different set of obstacles to learning than maybe some of our students. But one of the things that the research shows is that when you get students really committed to the intrinsic, inherent meaning of their learning, then they might be willing to skip an extra shift at work, pay the money, park their car, and come, because they're going to learn something that matters to them, not only for the test, but also for themselves. And I think we give our students a lot of requirements, a lot of disjointed things that they have to fulfill for good intentions, but that aren't necessarily fulfilling those intentions. We, of course, want our students to be numerate and literate, and we want them to have some understanding of history and arts and theology and philosophy. But I talk to students all the time, and they tell me all the time that they learn stuff for the test and they forget it as soon as they're done. Mm-hmm. And that is a huge waste of time, money, effort, energy, opportunity. And it seems to me we have a responsibility not to waste that time, to do something really meaningful with these precious hours we have together, whether it's the community college student who shows up not just for the PowerPoint, but for something to happen. And I think many people at Notre Dame do it really well, and some don't.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for being here today and engaging so thoughtfully. I hope you'll keep the discussion going. I am just so thankful to these three panelists, three of my favorite people. It was a really excellent discussion. I think one theme that we've heard today is the tension between the dignity and value of each human person and the systems that we build to support learning at scale. And I think something that has come out is that we are made for each other. We're made to learn with each other. And the challenge before us is to design the structures that help as many people as possible, as many children and college students as possible, to reach their full potential without losing sight of the individual, irreplaceable worth of every single human. And so with that, we're going to thank our panelists.
And thank you guys. Yay.